Alright, let's finish the react for we're gonna finish Magnus the Red. I'll finish that so that can be a thing now. Alright, you guys ready? Wait, I think I need to be on my regular model. Magnus. Shut up. Alright, I'll go back to my other model after. Here we go. Alright guys, here we go!
Scheme around the War Master, Horus, and sought to warn him. By projecting his psychic essence into Horus's dreams, he aimed to alert his brother to the impending danger. However, he was oblivious to the corruption already festering within Horus, and the critical role the word-bearers would play in the unfolding tragedy. When Magnus appeared in his visions, he saw Erebus there, pushing the already falling Horus into the embrace of chaos. Cyclops failed to dissuade his brother, and then, despairing, he decided to use the power of his legion's greatest mages to deliver news of the impending civil war to the Emperor himself on Terra. It was unwise to use the standard means of astro-telepathy, for it would take a long time to transmit the message. When everything was ready, his astral body separated from his material shell and floated upward. Magnus laughed happily, welcoming the familiar energy waves and currents that embraced him like a long-absent friend. He was a bright star, and the others were shimmering bits of amber compared to his divine radiance. In the great ocean, he could be anything. Here there were no inhibitions, and anything was possible. He rushed through the surging shafts of colour, light, and nameless dimensions, and worlds floated
Volume?
past him.
It's not high enough
He
yet?
hurried toward his goal like the most incredible comet that had ever flown among the stars, and even the predators tried to get out of his way. They recognized him, and in a realm where the light of creation burned in every breath, his dazzling radiance struck fear into their hearts. New philosophies and lines of thought were born in the minds of mortals who were fortunate enough to be near his route. Finally, he found a fragment of the web and attempted to break in with silver lightning. This act took the lives of dozens of Psyker thralls on Prospero, who had fueled him during the ritual. Then he rained down mighty fists upon the wall. But with each blow, a dozen thralls perished. Magnus felt his strength draining away. In the next moment, he was enveloped in streams of warm light, and a bright psychic entity appeared before him, offering help and infusing the Cyclops with its power. Magnus believed that both evil and good beings existed in the great ocean, and that they could be interacted with to varying degrees. There was no doubt that the entity before him was not a tainted entity that could enlighten not only him, but all of humanity. The Primarch accepted the help, not realizing how wrong he was. The wall parted, letting out a shrill groan that sounded like a cry of pain. He determined the route to Terra and rushed forward. A short time later, the golden portal beneath the Emperor's palace flared with its own internal light, as if the metal on the other side was glowing hot from an invisible torch. The huge automatic guns mounted around the perimeter of the hall raised their barrels and switched to combat mode. Some circuits overloaded, and miniature lightning bolts began to leap between the machines. The adepts rushed away from the door. They didn't know what was behind it, but they were smart enough to prefer fleeing. Crackling energy discharges erupted from the molten metal and incinerated those who had not escaped. The symbols carved into the stone exploded with sharp pops.
Is Magnus causing this?
Finally, all the lights in the hall went out, and the results of centuries of work were irrevocably destroyed. The Emperor's custodians grabbed their weapons, but no amount of training could have prepared them for what happened next. A massive red figure appeared in the doorway, engulfed in flames. It burst into the hall, scattering tongues of fire. The creature, composed of moving streams of light and stellar matter, spread a glow that blinded everyone around it. And at the sight of its many eyes, no one could shake off the consciousness of his own mortality. No one had ever seen such a...
So what I'm guessing is Magnus is corrupted or something now?
horrible vision, and the real heart of this creature was so powerful that it beat only in specially created flesh. The Emperor alone recognized the magnificent angel, and when he did, he was greatly saddened. Their thoughts met, and in that moment of close contact, the galaxy changed forever. A silent conversation took place between the Emperor and Magnus. Everything Magnus had done was revealed, and everything the Emperor had planned was revealed. The Primarch saw himself sitting on the Golden Throne, using its incredible power to guide humanity to dominate the entire galaxy. He was to be his father's chosen instrument to achieve ultimate victory. And he was intolerably pained that his thoughtless arrogance had shattered that dream. Magnus believed he had surpassed his father in subduing the forces of the great ocean. He believed he had learned to control its power, but in the ruins of his father's greatest work, he realized the truth. The key to everything was the Golden Throne. Extracted from the buried ruins from the depths of the barren desert itself, it had been the natural magnet that could unlock the mystery of the warp currents and cast a net over them. Now all that was left of it was rubble, and its incredibly complex stabilizers and warp dampers had melted into a homogeneous mass. Magnus's astral body rushed toward the gap he had made in the web, where countless hordes of warp creatures had already gathered, subsisting solely on destruction. He raced through the timeless depths of the great ocean and awoke in the reflecting...
So he accidentally destroyed part of the Golden Throne or something? And now he's gonna fight, I'm guessing, the demons he accidentally, let loose?
Caves at the center of the abode of the dead. There were no thralls left alive, and even their bodies had been desiccated to a decrepit shell by his spell. He was met only by Ahriman, but even he looked haggard beyond repair. With tears in his eyes, Magnus rushed away from the scene of his crime and sprinted to the Pyramid of Photep, ignoring Ahriman's questions. Alone, amidst the deceptive results of centuries of research, his vision became clouded with a bloody veil. The pristine Tizca seemed to live its life unaware of the catastrophe Magnus had brought upon the planet. Magnus the Red's actions have created a demon-infested area in the Imperium's domain of the web, which has come to be known as Magnus's Madness. The Legio Custodes, Adeptus Mechanicus, and a wide variety of military personnel were drawn into a grueling war, and the Emperor took the Golden Throne to contain the influx of warp essence. He was furious at his son's willful violation of his son's prohibitions on the use of magic. His actions had damaged a secret project, centuries in the making, to use the construct to create routes around the warp. The Emperor then instructed Leman Russ, Primarch of the Space Wolves, to bring Magnus quickly to Terra to account for his actions. It is hard to say whether the Emperor learned of Horus from Magnus's mind and knew of Leman Russ's animosity. But what happened next forever shackled the Emperor to the throne and changed the face of the galaxy. On his way to Prospero, the War Master contacted the Wolf Lord and made some adjustments to the order. He convinced his brother that the Crimson King wished to destroy their father, and that his appearance on Terra would have fatal consequences. Magnus must not be allowed near the Emperor and must be destroyed. Magnus the Red was in his chambers in total confusion. He realized too late that his vanity had prevented him from heeding his father's warnings, that he had been mistaken in thinking he controlled forces beyond his control.
So his hubris caused... That's kind of disappointing. I bet for him to realize that...
And he realized too late that he'd fallen into a trap. That's the price of all mistakes, realizing them too late. Only now did he realize that he should stop staring into the abyss of warp as the Emperor had warned, but it was too late, for the abyss was already staring back at him. Magnus was addressed by an entity from the cracked mirror. It spoke of his exceptional role in the events to come, that he had a better destiny than to rot on the Golden Throne, guiding ships across the galaxy. And then he went back for a moment to the days when he had first taken command of the Legion, to find a cure for the flesh change. Magnus...
Oh, Hizek was the entity that helped him. Ugh.
Stepped into the warp and fought the demon Coronzon. who appeared in the form of a giant serpent. The Primarch was victorious and plucked the knowledge from the warp. The second time he met him was on Agoru, when he was sealing the breach. And then the serpent said that Cyclops had already drunk from the poisonous cup, and it was time to pay the bill. However, he grabbed the serpent and strangled it. But now it was clear that he had only been allowed to think as if he had won. For before him was a consciousness far more powerful than an ordinary demon. Such entities were called nothing less than God by mortals in their meager language. Blinded by his own pride and his desire to save his sons, the Primarch did not realize that he had made a bargain not with Corazon, the demon of dispersion, but with the Lord of Change himself. His legion had only received a reprieve, for now the bargain was coming to an end, and one of the truths of Imperius was coming for Magnus and his sons. The Cyclops resisted, but Tzeentch voiced his future fate and offered to see it for himself if the Primarch did not believe his words. In desperation, Magnus looked into the warp and saw his destiny coming to him in the form of wolves stalking among the stars. When the first bombs fell on Prospero, Ahriman was horrified to find that the orbital fleet was scattered, the defences were down, and the shields were down, and only the Cain shield over the city was doing its job, for it was supported by the Thousand Sons through their efforts.
And they didn't think they were going to get attacked, so they only had the, main shield up. Not all the shields, just one main shield.
The Legionnaires turned
so they, they wouldn't die from an
their
attack.
Primarch for answers, and then he told them all that had happened. The bargain with a powerful deity older than time itself, the price for salvation from the flesh change, the fact that their Primarch had been a puppet all along, and that the Thousand Sons must accept their fate and be destroyed. Magnus the Red was unwilling to betray his father, and in desperation decided to take his punishment in full and surrender. But his legionaries refused to surrender, and Prospero was engulfed in flames. The Thousand Sons put up a decent resistance from the start. At one point, the advantage was completely on their side. But then the Null Divas entered the fray, and the Psyker-deprived warriors began to lose. Soon the punitive army reached the City of Light.
And the Null Sisters came with Leman Russ. Oh, sealed his entire squad's fate.
Magnus watched Tizca's demise from...
Oh, he basically accepted his fate and caused himself and all his people to,
the
get
topmost
destroyed.
balcony of his pyramid. There was no reflective surface left inside his chambers, no opportunity for the persistent temptation that called for another mistake. He clutched the balcony railing with his fingers and wept bitter tears for his lost world and his dying sons. The Primarch longed to support his sons, but he did not want to make the last mistake of his life and went mad, trying to push the voices of the Legionnaires calling out to him out of his head. Soon he was overcome by his unwillingness to accept what was happening. When Ahriman's line of defense at the Pyramid of Photep became the last frontier, the Primarch made a choice to stand against the punitive army. When he appeared on the battlefield, the sky became a transparent window to other realms. The doomed world was stared at by bulging eyes the size of mountains and formless creatures, the likes of which no madman could see in a delirium. Hundreds of warriors died in the same instant from this blasphemous horror. Magnus fought Russ to the death. Their blows were as loud as planets colliding.
See why people like Russ. He's a fighter.
Both men's armor broke, lightning crackled around them, weapons were covered in frost, the ground cracked, and bodies of water turned to acid. In the end, Cyclops was defeated. Leman Russ threw his brother to his raised knee, and the crack of the Crimson King's spine breaking echoed in the hearts of every one of the Thousand Sons. At the last moment, Magnus cast a spell and carried the entire legion into the warp. And so the Thousand Sons found a new home on the planet of the Witchfinders. Since then, their situation had worsened, for flesh rebirths had become more frequent, and the Legion's numbers had fallen back to 1,000. Then earthquakes ripped the surface of the planet, and the ugly obsidian tower rose to the sky, Magnus standing atop it, wings spread. It was not all that clear-cut, however, for Leman Russ had not merely defeated the Primarch, but had split his essence into many shards that scattered across the waves of warp. It was hard to say whether these shards felt themselves to be one and only, or whether they realized that the dweller atop the obsidian tower was the base from which they had all broken away. Ahriman was tasked with...
Wait, so I don't understand what the shards of him would be. Would they be like parts of his mind that are now separated or something? Is that why he's not a... Wait, so is Lehman Ross not a good guy? I was taking it from all this stuff that he was a good guy.
With finding the shards to save his genetic father, and he, gathering like-minded people, set out to find them. However, not all of them were found and returned. For example, the remaining shard on Prospero was destroyed by Jagatai Khan before telling the Primarch of the White Scars what had happened on the planet. One of the shards of Magnus the Red was located in a hidden repository on Sorcerer's Planet, secured within the ceremonial urn of a notable Psyker scholar of the Thousand Suns. This scholar had foreseen the Space Wolves' assault on Prospero, contributing significantly to the Legion's preparations. After their demise, the scholar's remains were safeguarded by a loyal sorcerer of the Thousand Suns present on the planet at that time. Another fragment of Magnus the Red's essence was located atop a perilous peak within the planet of the sorcerers, embodying the martial prowess of the Crimson King. This fragment was first encountered by the agents of the Sigillite, seeking to secure it for the Imperium, yet they were unable to overcome its guardians. Ultimately, this fragment was bound within a sorcerer of the Thousand Suns, held in stasis until such time as Azek Ahriman, the Legion's chief sorcerer, would seek to recover it. For one of his shards, Ahriman had to travel into Terra's past to find King Cadmus, ruler of the Kingdom of Boeotia.
Wait, so he had to time travel? Is that what that... They can time travel in this? I don't know if that's a good thing.
It contained a vast library of lost knowledge, mostly concerning ancient Greece. King Cadmus was eventually defeated in the Boeotian conflict. But years later, a shard of Magnus representing the quest for lost knowledge settled in his body, travelling back in time. Ironically, upon entering Cadmus's chambers, Ahriman met a civilian who introduced himself as Caspar Hauser. The librarian grinned, thinking it was a joke, for he recognized the reference to the so-called Child of Europa from an old Terran legend, through whom Lehman Russ would try to contact Magnus and inform him of Prospero's imminent burning. And another shard was found on Nicaea that represented Magnus's bitterness at being betrayed.
Okay, so his emotions got broken up? Is that what we're saying? Because it... No, because one of them was his prowess. Like... Wait, so every single, essence of him was broken up. So, his battle prowess, his emotions, each of his emotions. I'm guessing, each of his... ideals and stuff.
By the Emperor and the Imperium, which was awakened after the monstrous judgment on that planet. While Ahriman searched for the shards, Magnus was slowly consumed by madness. He tried his best to recover his lost knowledge and began to write down everything he knew. He was surrounded by less powerful shards who were diligently recording the information in folios. But sometimes terrible things happened. They began to disappear, the identity of the Crimson King crumbled, and his ashes were carried away by the winds of the warp. More than once, Magnus was visited by Primarch Lorgar, whom he first mistook for a ghost and threw out of his tower. Another time, he already knew who was before him. His brother had tried to persuade him to join Horus. Sometimes he appeared to Lorgar in astral form when Urizen was preparing to attack Ultramar. But at that moment, the Crimson King had not yet decided to join the warrior. When Ahriman...
Also, him going mad caused him to become evil? Hi, Mithrin.
Returned to the planet of the Witchfinders, he saw a withered and aged Primarch. But after reuniting with the lost shards, he was reborn. It was the majestic and formidable Crimson King, who in his address to his son said that they would side with the warrior and that he would not rest until they had stormed the castle to retrieve the greatest shard that was locked in the dungeons of terror. Magnus's noble traits were embodied in that shard, and it roamed the dungeons of the Imperial Palace until Malcador the Sigilate sealed it in the body of Royal Arvid. Magnus eventually appeared in the material world on Ulanor and knelt before the warrior. In the early stages of the Siege of Terror, he appeared at a war council of traitors aboard the Vengeful Spirit, giving advice on disabling the Emperor's psychic barrier that prevented demons from appearing on Terra. After the fall of the Lionsgate spaceport, rumours spread that Magnus had finally been summoned to the battlefield, and Malcador believed he was using his psychic power to weaken the Emperor. During a raid on the moon to capture Magna Mater by the loyalist ship Sisypheus, the Crimson King ordered the loyalists to assist in their escape. During the assault on the Colossus Gate, Cyclops met his fallen brother Mortarion. Sympathizing with the constant pain the latter was experiencing, Magnus the Red taught him how to better control his powers to regain his former composure. In truth, Magnus simply did this in order to manipulate Mortarion into launching an attack to cover his own infiltration of the Imperial dungeon. Later, when the attack by the Thousand Suns and the Death Guard on the Colossus Gate failed, Magnus said that the operation was not a complete failure, for he got what he wanted. Shortly after the defeat of the renegades at Saturn's Wall...
Wait, so if all of his loyalty and, like, stuff was in that spirit, wouldn't getting that make him a good Primarch again?
Cyclops made his move, gathering the Thousand Suns on Terra to attack the Palace region in the Western Hemisphere. After breaking through, he entered the battle in person.
I want to say this is the fourth Primarch we've... I'm trying to remember. Ankaron, Vulcan, Heliman, and this is Magnus, right? Pretty sure this is the fourth.
But was opposed by
Also, like, he thought he would become, like, he would join the Emperor again? Or did the Emperor not let him and he went mad because of that?
Bjarki and his wolves. However, this was merely a ruse to infiltrate the sanctuary with Ahriman. Mentally masquerading as loyalists, Cyclops and his retinue made their way through the Great Observatory, where the Crimson King unexpectedly saved a group of refugees from Phosphex bombs. After penetrating deep beneath the palace through Lenga Hall, Magnus and his sons appeared before Malcador and Olivia Sureka on the shores of a vast underground lake. Malcador offered Magnus a game of regicide with Sureka, and it soon became apparent that he was trying to win the Crimson King over to his side. As they travelled deeper into the Imperial dungeon, Magnus and his entourage next encountered a projection of the Emperor that led them to the throne room. There Magnus stood before his father, who sat on the golden throne. Determined to fulfill his vow to kill the Emperor, the Crimson King destroyed the projection and activated his staff to deliver the killing blow. But before he could follow through, Vulcan blocked his path.
Yay,
the eyes
Vulcan!
Of the Emperor of Mankind suddenly opened, and Magnus found himself floating on the ether with his father, watching the rise and fall of the galaxy. The Emperor showed a future in which the Primarchs had never opposed the Imperium, and the last peace in the galaxy had been won in the name of humanity. In that future, Magnus sat on the Golden Throne and ruled the Imperial Web, and his soul was in eternal bliss, drifting in the Immaterium with the Emperor and discovering the frontiers of cosmic knowledge. His father declared that such a future was not yet lost, and Magnus could return to the Loyalist side at the head of the new legion being prepared for him. Together, they would expel the traitors from Terra and accomplish the Great Purge. The price was high, however, for the Emperor had declared the Thousand Suns damned because of the rampant flesh alteration, exactly the same price Magnus the Red could have paid when Leman Russ burned his planet, but he had not, for no father would wish his children dead. And now the Emperor was offering his son to pay that price again. The Thousand Suns could not follow Magnus back into the Emperor's arms. They had to be purged. The price was too high, so he struck at the Emperor again but found himself in battle with Vulcan. During the battle, Magnus almost defeated the Salamander Primarch, but the sacrifice of Barik Zaitos allowed Vulcan to apparently force the Crimson King into submission. Before Vulcan could deliver the final blow, Magnus gave himself over completely to the forces of chaos, taking on a new etheric form, and was banished by the psychic warders of the Imperial dungeon along with his sons. Magnus, son of the
Like, from one end, I understand why he didn't want to pay that price. But from what I understand, wasn't there less than 1,000 left? I guess he was, like, so mad at this point, he didn't realize that... He could have at least, like, tried to have been like, can the ones that are alive stay at least? Like, I can understand the one thing I don't understand the Emperor didn't do is say, like, we can't make any more of your old batch, basically. Or something like that. Like, let the ones that are still there survive. Not like they can procreate anyways. They're so warped and stuff. Well, that's the thing. He said that they were gonna create him a new one. But what I don't understand is why didn't he just say the ones that are there are the last of that gene seed? Like, we're gonna recreate your gene seed or something. That's what I don't understand. I feel like, from what I understand of the Emperor, he is both very smart and very dumb. Like, some of the things he does are incredibly smart. But also, like, he is prone to being tricked. And some of his stuff clouds him to other options. So, like, he himself is flawed and human.
The Emperor died. The demon Prince of Change was born. The next time he appeared, he was already a winged avatar of Tzeentch, whose legs ended in split hooves. He traveled to the Imperial web, performing a psychic ritual and attempting to strip the Emperor of his remaining powers so that demons could manifest even within the Sanctum Imperialis itself. Malcador sent Vulcan to finish off his brother when the gates of eternity themselves were besieged. After traveling to the impossible city in the spider's web, Vulcan finally appeared before Magnus. Again, ignoring his brother's manipulations, including the vision of Prospero burning, they went into battle. At the beginning of the battle, it seemed to Vulcan that he was attacking smoke, for the real Magnus was behind the barrier, immersed in ritual. The Lord of Nocturne took advantage of this and provoked his enemy to attempt a direct kill. Unaware of Vulcan's immortality, Cyclops used all available methods, decapitated him, strangled him by turning his lungs into amber, sucked his blood and burned him. But each time the eternal Vulcan revived and attacked Magnus. Exhaustion took over, and Magnus fell into increasing despair. He entered Vulcan's mind, trying to explain his actions, but the Primarch only berated him for his arrogant and reckless use of the magic that had turned him into a slave to chaos. Bringing his hammer in for a final blow, Vulcan swayed, and Magnus managed to use a spell to destroy his brother on a genetic level. Before the salamander's body crumbled, he was able to smash Cyclops' head with his hammer and send him into warp. After the Emperor defeated Horus, legions of traitors fled Terra. The Thousand Suns returned to the planet of the Witchfinders in the Eye of Terror, which had become a chaotic reflection of their homeworld. Tzeentch had one more gift for the Thousand Suns, namely the complete return of their aberrant genetic mutations that threatened to turn all surviving space marines into mindless chaos brats. Several high-ranking officers of the Legion, led by Azek Ahriman, formed a secret clique to find ways to stop the flesh alteration. They eventually used a powerful spell that had the opposite effect, killing all those Legion Astartes who lacked psychic abilities and turning them into living automatons. Their organic bodies turned to ash, while their unsuspecting souls were trapped inside the power armor. Every joint of the armor was magically sealed, and the only way for a soul to break out of this prison was destruction. The minority of Astartes from the Thousand Sons, who did not succumb to the spell later known as the Rubric of Ahriman, found their psychic abilities multiplied. The ritual also achieved its purpose as mutations ceased in both survivors and undead brethren. In fury, Magnus attacked Ahriman and his clique, but was unable to kill him. For at the last moment, the Architect of Fates personally stopped the Crimson King's hand, for Ahriman was a useful tool for advancing Tzeentch's far-reaching plans in the...
From what I know of Tzeentch, it doesn't even make sense that he would actively do anything. He likes chaos. Why would he just let chaos happen? Like, I could understand him affecting stuff, but him taking over and, like, creating his own avatar and stuff, he wouldn't need that.
Material dimension. Magnus banished Ahriman and his remaining companions from the Witch Planet and ordered them to wander the galaxy forever in search of understanding and knowledge of the true nature of chaos.
From what I understand, we're only doing the older lore.
Magnus realized that
all part of the
everything
game
that
against the
happened
other gods
had been planned by the Way Changer,
Understandable.
and that he had no power to prevent it. For the Legion, for which he had done so much, was now reduced to ashes-filled golems. The Demon Primarch climbed to the top of his tower and swore that the entire galaxy would burn as Horus once did. Since then, he has waged his war against the father who once betrayed him. He was once a paragon of humanity, but the last vestiges of it dissipated in the Emperor's palace when his father proposed the destruction of the Thousand Sons. Now Magnus is a monstrous creature of chaos, subject to the sinister and sophisticated will of Tzeentch, the great conspirator. His skin is always red, crackling and glowing from absorbed warp matter, and from his back protrude huge wings adorned with the writhing runes of Tzeentch. With his single eye, he sees through both immaterium and real space, weaving threads of the manifold future and winding them to form a loop with which he can trap his enemies. Once he sought knowledge for its own sake. Now he seeks only that which will allow the Imperium to burn for its crimes against him. In a galaxy torn by war, few things are more terrifying on a battlefield than a demon Primarch. Where Magnus steps, the fabric of reality thins and tears, time and space violently sliding apart to allow him.
So basically, full story is Magnus went mad. He was gonna face his punishment and everything, but then he went mad hearing the cries of his sons as he was facing his punishment. And in going mad, completely reversed, basically.
To pass. His very sight burns the mind with shifting paradoxical images and glimpses of warp, incomprehensible to mortal thought. Those upon whom Magnus's shadow falls are immediately plunged into impenetrable darkness, and their minds curl into a dense singularity as the demonic presence of the Crimson King invades their psyche. Even fearless warriors who have endured countless terrible conflicts find their courage shattered when the Lord of the Thousand Sons goes on a rampage. Magnus's blazing eye emits blasts of raw psychic energy. With each crushing blow, titans and armored columns are ripped from reality, their very essence transformed into clouds of screaming atoms. As the Demon Primarch approaches his foes, they are caught in a field of fluctuating energy, an aura of malicious consciousness that warps...
And basically, he's so strong now, he makes, like, people go mad and stuff just being near them.
All things in accordance with Magnus's will. This influence exposes the most impenetrable defenses, leaving the enemy open to destruction. His horned garb has undergone a change. The plate armor is now adorned with writings in a dark tongue. Their unholy symbolism creates a tapestry of madness. Anunura's blade is now known as the Blade of Magnus. He uses it to cut through enemy ranks, slicing tank hulls and torsos in half, separating souls from their material bodies. Those who are not instantly transformed into pools of blood or clouds of flame suffer an even worse fate. The enchanted sword alters the torn flesh of its victims, infusing them with empirical power, creating writhing spawns of chaos. Above his horns shines the crown of the Crimson King, a halo of psychic power that shields his mind and body from harm while protecting his physical mental self. The futility of confronting Magnus's anger becomes apparent when the enemy fire dissipates without causing harm. The mental discharges turn into harmless sparks, and the giant chain swords grind to a halt in front of that etheric barrier. Sometime later, in the 41st millennium, Ahriman attempted to create a second rubric on the Sorcerer Planet, but a rival clique of Thousand Sons mages discovered that the rubric would lead to the destruction of Magnus, and the Primarch eventually used the ritual to assimilate with more lost shards of himself. He became almost whole, but the shards that were lost were those that embodied his noblest qualities.
Oh.
The demon Primarch appeared in the material world in the last years of the 41st millennium.
Well, we're going to do another vote soon on YouTube.
He had been preparing for the invasion for centuries.
That's one of the things that YouTube has full control over.
Corrupting the gene seed at the Battle of Fang, and using the shifter to provoke an Imperial attack. Magnus's invasion was eventually stopped, and he was banished back to the Warp by Logan Grimnar, wielder of the Axe of Morkai. But that in turn no longer mattered, as he succeeded in his ultimate goal. By sacrificing of the planet Midgardia, Magnus moved the planet of the sorcerers into the material world. The Crimson King reappeared at the head of the Thousand Sons in a massive ship resembling the Pyramid of Tizca, and organized a ritual that prevented the expedition of Primarch Robout Guilliman from reaching Terra and trapped him in Maelstrom. Guilliman managed to escape the trap, but Magnus saw it coming. He met his brother inside the web. His plan was to trick Guilliman's allies into opening a portal to Terra, allowing his own forces to enter. However, the Lord of Ultramar had figured out Magnus and headed for the moon. Magnus and Guilliman engaged in battle. Cyclops had the upper hand until the Sisters of Silence arrived from Terra, weakening Magnus so much that Guilliman stabbed him in the chest. The Crimson King was forced to retreat with the Thousand Sons. Magnus later appeared at the head of a huge Tzeentch army during the invasion of the Stygius sector. They managed to capture many worlds that the Primarch Mortarion had previously appropriated and turned into the stars of the Stygius. Loyalist forces were sent there to retake the Stygius sector, but it failed even with the help of the Eldar from the world ship Ulthwe. The sector was the first of the domains Tzeentch planned to claim. Magnus soon returned to Prospero, intending to use the newly discovered portals to summon an army of demons. However, his plans were thwarted by the Space Wolves. In the midst of the battle, the Crimson King was tricked by Lucas the Trapper, who offered him a necessary spell that was actually just a useless piece of paper. The trick allowed Lucas and the last remaining wolves to escape. Since the opening of the Great Rift, Magnus has succeeded where the Emperor failed, and elevated humanity to a truly psychic race. Radiating a magical aura from the recently relocated Prospero, he attempted to create a fulcrum for Tzeentch in the material dimension. But his plans were thwarted by the Imperium's sudden attack on the planet Sortiarius. The current location of the Crimson King is unknown, but one thing is certain: he appears wherever the Architect of Fates intends to take over another dominion in the material universe. He leads powerful armies of demons and chaos space marines. He is the architect of nightmarish rituals that can affect entire star systems. To conclude the story of the most powerful Primarch, we must return to the question: did Magnus betray, or was he betrayed? There is no doubt that the Crimson King was a victim of his own pride, for he mistakenly believed that he controlled forces that could not be controlled.
Yeah, pride was definitely his downfall.
And bring mankind to the apotheosis of knowledge did not give him a...
Guys on YouTube, don't read that last comment on stream. Oh my god.
Moment to doubt, to stop and think. It is said that when the gods want to test a man, they throw his strongest qualities against him. That's what happened to Magnus. And it was a test he failed. So did Magnus betray? Yes, but not right away.
I feel like it was more his hubris caused him to betray. It was more of a betray and be betrayed at the same. Oh gosh.
You're welcome, YouTube.
Scheme around the war.
Oh my god, YouTube. Shut up, Twitch chat! Shut up, kobolds. Alright, I'm supposed to watch this song as like a bonus for you guys. And the next vote will happen within the next few days. We'll get ready to vote. Alright, what is this? Oh, it's the Ultramarine song? I'm not gonna get copyrighted for this, am I? Pretty good. I gotta say, this is a really good song. Facebook says it's fine. Who am I to inquire? They're alright. Hoping. We are heroes, proud and strong. Breaking banners, a shield and sword. Running, wearing the blue and gold. There's no doubt we're the greatest of them all. We're the rest. We'll shine. We're the greatest of them all. We're the rest. Now gaze in. Now we're the greatest of them all. Is this a meme song? If you can get the sound sample and stuff, I will make it a sound redeem.
Dad fucking says we love goddamn elves now. I fucking love elves. Holy fuck.
Oh my god.
God fucking did it.
We
are heroes, proud and strong. Bringing banners, a shield and sword. Proudly wearing the blue and gold. There's no doubt we're the greatest of them all. We're the rest. We'll shine. We're the greatest of them all. We're the rest. Now gaze in. Now we're the greatest of them all.
Oh my god.
We're so fucking awesome, it's no just. Rest. We're the rest. Better than the rest, there is no contest. Rest. We're the rest. We're so fucking awesome, it's no just. Rest. We're the rest. Better than the rest.
You guys stop fighting.
We fuck all of the earth with the best.
Enjoy the meme song. That was pretty good. That was by StringStorm. Original song featuring Craig and Glowtide. Craig 21. Craig? Craig. Hey, yeah, that was pretty good.